where a former deputy national chairman of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Bode George, has warned the party against accepting the Congress carried out by its former Lagos State chairman, Deji Doherty, saying the court ruling against him may cost the party the elections. Mr. Bode George urged the PDP to move its national convention, which is scheduled to take place on the 28th of May and 29th, from Abuja to Lagos, noting that the All Progressive Congress APC would also hold theirs at the same venue on the 30th and 31st. In his words,
APC wants to hold a national convention on the 30th of May and 31st, and we are holding ours on May 28th and 29th in Abuja. How is that possible? People would arrive for the PDP convention 2 or 3 days before the day, and APC delegates would also arrive few days before theirs. This could create confusion, which would be disastrous for us. And that was said by the Chief Bode George, the former Deputy National Chairman of the People's Democratic Party. Now, joining us to look at the worries raised by Bode George is political analyst Demola Olarenwaju. Welcome to Breakfast Central. Demola, good morning.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you.
All right, let's talk about the worries of the former Deputy National Chairman of the party. Do you think these concerns are valid? He's calling for a change in the date of the National Convention.
Well, I think his concerns are quite valid. There might be, the logistics arrangements in Abuja between the PDP and the APC obviously could lead to some issues. Especially, you would have an overstretched security force. You would have issues with booking different hotels. It's generally, it could be quite chaotic, in the Federal Capital Territory. And I think, Chief Bode George's call is quite valid. I think he is in line. And I support and agree with the call that the PDP convention should be shifted to Lagos instead, for obvious reasons. I mean, Lagos State is one of the most swing states when it comes to the national politics. And of course, Lagos is a highly populated state. And then again, it's a state where, opinions are formed and opinions are shaped. If you remember, in 2015, the All Progressive Congress had its national convention in Lagos State at the Teslim Balogun Stadium, while the PDP had it in Abuja. In 2019, the APC had its own version in Abuja, while the PDP had it in Port Harcourt. And so it's nothing strange for PDP to move its party convention, its national convention, outside the Federal Capital Territory. And I think that in this instance, Chief Bode George is right to ask that it should be moved to Lagos State.
All right, so we can see that you're in agreement with him, especially looking at the fact that Lagos has a diverse culture and a large population. Now let's talk about the seat. Everyone is jostling for the hot seat. The PDP, just like the APC, seems to have a lot of politicians jostling for the hot seat. What do you make of the situation?
Well, I think it's normal in politics. The PDP situation is very normal. You have a number of contenders, about 16 to 17 of them, in the People's Democratic Party. And then in the APC, you have, I'm not quite sure what the number is, but I know it's north of about 2 dozens. Of course, that's clearly a very unwieldy number when you consider the fact that they are selling their form for about 100 million naira each, whereas the PDP forms go for 40 million naira. So basically, I think, in the PDP, the situation is clearly, the issues that have come up have been issues around zoning. And if you look at the trend within the APC, presently, they are also trying to move away from the stance of zoning. And that's why you have people like the Senate President, Senator Ahmed Lawan, in the race, and a couple of other Northerners in the race. So basically, I think, the zoning issues will be overcome in the PDP, I'm sure, because the PDP has insisted that, it's not zoning its positions for now. And, the onus really is not on the PDP because, the party has not been in power for the past 8 years, whereas the APC has been in power for the past 8 years with a Northerner. And so it is expected that the APC should, at this time, rotate power down to the south. For PDP, I think, what's going on is the usual internal conflicts that you have when aspirations and ambitions clash. And I think at the end of the day, that the PDP is going to be able to resolve the crisis, because PDP does not have the powers basically to coerce anyone to step down for anyone. We've been hearing that the APC is going to try to ask using the powers of the office of the presidency to try and ask some people to step down for each other. And of course, that may cause some problems, because, if someone has paid 100 million naira and you're asking the person to step down, it might create some problems. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks coming up in the politics.
Demola, what are your fears with regards, the chances of the PDP? Because I'm sure that you must have also looked at you must have read the room, and I understand that social media may not be a good enough place to judge, the chances of a candidate. But you must have also done your own assessment. What are your own personal fears? Do you think the PDP may still be making certain mistakes, going forward?
Well, I think the first thing that is different about this 2023 electoral season is the fact that you have a very long period between the choosing of the candidates of the party and the actual polls. You have about 9 months. You have until June 4 to submit the name of your presidential candidate to the Independent National Electoral Commission. And then from June 4 until February, I think about February 23, that's about 9 months basically for you to harmonize differences within the party. And if I understand what you're alluding to, it's the tendency or the growing sentiment that the PDP should give its ticket to His Excellency, the former governor of Anambra State, Governor Peter Obi. And I think, well, it is a valid call. His strength on social media is something that the party definitely needs to harness on its way to winning in 2023. If that is not rightly managed, then of course, it could create all sorts of complications for the PDP. If there's one thing that I, think that the PDP will do, is that it will harmonize itself at the end of the day using various internal mechanisms. And the reason I think that is because, like I mentioned, the 9-month period between the choosing of the candidates and the actual elections itself. So I think it will be able to harmonize itself at the end of the day. But of course, there is a very strong chance that Governor Peter Obi might emerge as the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party. It's merely a matter of aligning yourself with what the delegates want at this time. And if that is done, I believe that whoever has the highest number of delegates will emerge. But it is important, that the party conducts itself with all credibility. The elections must be, that's the primaries, presidential primaries must be done with every sense of credibility and transparency. If that is done, whoever loses out will know that he lost out fairly and squarely. If, however, the party allows itself to be railroaded and the process becomes somehow compromised, then it sends a signal that, whoever lost did not lose fairly, and that could create all sorts of complications. So I think it's for us to see how the political process plays out, but it is important for the party to conduct credible, transparent, and free and fair presidential primaries, wherever they hold it, whether in Lagos or in Abuja.
You talk about losing fairly and squarely, and I wonder if our politicians would be okay with the fact that they are not the ones that have been chosen for the presidential seat. We've seen a lot of the time after elections, election tribunal upon election tribunal, party division. So I don't know if we have much hope that when the party chooses who its presidential candidate will be, everyone will fall behind that person. But let's talk about zoning real quick. Why would you say the PDP actually decided to throw open its presidential ticket and not automatically zone it maybe to the south, as many had expected?
Because, zoning a presidential ticket is not exactly a priority for any political party. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is to win power. You are not, zoning a presidential ticket is not equivalent to zoning the presidency. When it comes to the presidency, you must have it before you can zone it. If you are not in power at the center, you cannot zone. So that, gives the PDP a sort of leeway to play around with the issue of zoning, because what would then happen is, if anyone becomes the presidential candidate, other positions will be zoned around that particular zone. So for instance, Governor Peter Obi emerges as the candidate, then the PDP can say the vice presidency is going to be zoned to this particular zone. The Senate presidency is going to be zoned to this particular zone, and so on and so forth. You zone around that position. But that person has to emerge from a free and fair process. And the reason is because you want somebody who is able to campaign in every part of the country. You want somebody who northern delegates can trust. You want somebody who southern delegates can trust. And when you arrive at the position through that means this person can then become a popular candidate or a candidate popular enough to win the general election. If you, however, zone it somewhere, you zone it to the southwest, what you are doing is you are not allowing your strongest candidate to emerge. And for a party that is not in government power, for a party that does not control federal power, that's like tying your hand twice. You are not in power, but you are still attempting to carry out zoning. So I quite understand what the PDP is trying to do. The PDP is trying to ensure that the strongest candidate or the most popular candidate emerges. And I think that's only fair for an opposition party. You would recall that all the while that the PDP was in power, the PDP used to zone power to different zones. Whereas, the opposition parties at that time, whether it was the ACN or whether it was the CPC or whether it was AMPP, they were never bound by the principles of zoning because everyone understood that they were not in power. And so it is the party that is in power that can zone power. If you are not a party in power, you cannot exactly zone power.
Okay, well, nicely put. Demola Olarenwaju, nice speaking with you this one. Thank you for joining us. And we, of course,
Thank you very much.
Would like to continue this conversation some other time. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. I need to.